6 years since the death of Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez, two men are locked in a power struggle. The country is dealing with a spiralling political and economic crisis. So is there a way out? And what's Chavez's legacy? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. When Venezuela's former President Hugo Chavez died on the 5th of March 2013, it sparked a series of events that are still playing out today. His hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, continued the policies that his critics say have led to hyperinflation and widespread shortages of food and medicine. Opposition leader Juan Guaido is demanding Maduro's resignation, but he's refusing to go. Guaido returned to Caracas on Monday. He defied a travel ban to drum up support from Latin American allies. Maduro threatened to arrest Guaido on his return, but the US warned that any action against him will have consequences. Guaido is now calling for more protests on Saturday against Maduro. We'll bring in our guests in a moment to discuss all of this, but first, Daniel Schweimler takes a look at the effect of Hugo Chavez's legacy on Venezuela's crisis.
Chavismo is dead. The opposition in Venezuela has been saying that since the president for whom the ideology was named died of cancer on the 5th of March 2013. But Hugo Chavez's chosen successor, Nicolas Maduro, continues to cling to power, under pressure from foreign governments and millions of his own people to step down. They blame him for rampant inflation, high crime, and chronic food and medicine shortages. Maduro blames foreign sabotage, particularly from the United States, for Venezuela's problems, but not as colourfully as Chavez once did, here criticising former US President George Bush at the United Nations in 2006.
The President of the United States, the gentleman to whom I refer as the devil, came here talking as if he owned the world. I think we could call a psychiatrist to analyze yesterday's statement made by the President of the United States.
Maduro says that Chavismo is alive and well, citing health and education programs and the continued redistribution of wealth begun by his predecessor. But even his supporters admit that Maduro is no Chavez, but he doesn't have the same charisma or political astuteness. He continues to talk of the future while aware of the mounting risks to his government.
I want peace for Venezuela. We all want peace for Venezuela. Stop the drums of war. Stop the threats of invasion. Let Venezuela say with one voice that we want peace. We want to be happy.
While the two men shared similar politics, the world has changed. Oil prices have slumped, and Venezuela's left-wing allies in the region have largely disappeared. Maduro's critics say that only flawed elections and support from the military keep him in power. Predictions of his imminent demise have been frequent these past 6 years, as they were for Chavez before him. Now President Maduro faces one of his toughest challenges yet. While Venezuela marks the 6th anniversary of the death of Hugo Chavez, the opposition is questioning his legacy. Nicolas Maduro supporters are wondering how much longer it will keep the president in office. Daniel Schweimler, Al Jazeera.
Well, we have the chance today to discuss the current crisis in the context of Venezuela's recent history, and we have our panel for us. Joining us from Caracas on Skype is Temir Porras. He's a former chief of staff for President Nicolas Maduro and a foreign policy advisor of late President Hugo Chavez. In Warwickshire in the UK, Tom Long, a professor at the University of Warwick, that's in the British Midlands, and in Richmond in Virginia in the US, also on Skype, but normally based in Venezuela, we have Roderick Navarro, a coordinator for the Venezuelan opposition party Rumbo Libertad. Welcome to you all. Can I start with you, Temir? Let's look back at where we are now and the recent history. 1998 was when Chavez came into power. He was replaced by Maduro. You worked for both of them. Your lot got us into this mess, didn't they?
Hi, thank you for having me. No, not at all. Absolutely not. The reading of the recent Venezuelan history is from 1999 onwards, a very difficult process led by President Chavez of building Venezuela's democracy. We need to understand why President Chavez was elected in the first place, that there was a huge debate in the country to create a new constitution that was endorsed, that was championed by Chavez, that was endorsed by a large part of the population, and that back then was rejected by the opposition, the very same people who today are backing Juan Guaido, and it's the very same constitution that Congressman Guaido is defending today. So one of the legacies of Hugo Chavez was in the first place giving us an institutional framework for renewing Venezuelan democracy. And the second thing, now that we are commemorating 6 years of his passing, President Chavez was a much more pragmatic leader than Mr. Maduro. One of the reasons, by the way, why I left Mr. Maduro's government and Mr. Maduro's administration is because two things. One, he wasn't able and willing to transform, to reform Venezuela's economy, which has led us to this terrible situation right now. And I don't agree with the idea with those who say that Maduro is pursuing Chavez's policies. That's very wrong. The reason, again, why we can see a sharp contrast between the legacy of Chavez during his term, where Venezuelans enjoyed their highest standards of living ever, when Venezuela is referred to as a country that was once a rich country, we're talking about the Venezuela of 2013. We're not talking about the Venezuela of 20, 30 years ago. Venezuelans enjoy their highest living standards ever under Chavez, and this has steeply deteriorated since his passing, and for a diversity of reasons, but among others, because Nicolas Maduro's leadership was extremely ineffective in dealing with the challenges of Venezuelan economy.
OK, I'd like to bring in Roderick. You are an opposition politician. Do you share that view? It was great under Chavez and Maduro dropped the ball.
Well, we believe that Maduro is the continuity of the Chavez legacy, okay? Because it's the same project. It's socialism, okay? And right now we are living in a country where we have 3 million people feeding from garbage, and 3,000 children at least have died for starvation. So we are living in a silent genocide where the numbers of deaths are bigger than any war occurring right now in the world. So right now, Chavez's legacy is destruction, is death, is narco, is Islamic terrorism, is castrism in the region. So I don't think that Chavez's legacy is a good thing. In fact, if you check the polls in Venezuela and the opinion studies, you can see that people doesn't like anymore this Chavista project. And the people is sick of socialism in the light way, and also in the hard way. So right now we have this Maduro usurper in the power. They doesn't want to leave the power, and not only him, but the rest of the Chavism in power, because they just want to be there forever. And the fight that people is doing for freedom and democracy right now, inside Venezuela and abroad Venezuela, is for having a republican system where everyone can go back to the country and rebuild the future and the country as well.
OK, well, we had two different perspectives there, Tom Long. You're a professor who studies Venezuela. They both have different views, one blaming Maduro, one saying the problem goes all the way back to Chavez. What's your view from your detailed study on Venezuela?
Well, I think it's helpful to put this actually in an even slightly longer context. And we can think of three different layers here that have played out over different time spans. In the longest layer, there are long-standing issues of the Venezuelan economy's reliance on oil. Venezuela has long been an oil economy. Its government has long been heavily dependent on rents from oil to fund itself. And that creates a whole host of longstanding economic problems. During oil booms, it tends to undermine other sectors of the Venezuelan economy. It also creates a pattern where, because the government is largely funded through oil royalties and oil sales, people are less demanding of accountability from their government. So we have that long underlying layer. We then have the political economy that Chavez built on top of that layer, which incorporated many facets of the pre-existing Venezuelan oil economy, but also changed the other aspects of the economic structure that scaled back private enterprise or increased the role of the state and later the role of the military in different aspects of the Venezuelan economy. That tended to create a conflict between productive sectors of the Venezuelan economy and the state, a conflict that was certainly active on both sides. And so that is this second layer that comes from the legacy of Chavez. And then finally, under Maduro, what we have seen is economic policy that is incompetent at best. So all of these negative trends, which are exacerbated in 2013, around the same time as Chavez's death, by the fall of the price of oil, are handled very poorly under the Maduro administration. There is an attempt to scale up some of the programs that political scientists would think of as clientelistic programs, that is, in exchange of goods for political loyalty, and to further push out private sector actors or to weaken the role of private sector actors in key areas of the economy through measures such as price fixing, through nationalizations, and again through increasing the military's control of crucial sectors like food distribution.
I'd like to keep the wider context in this discussion, but also bring in the most recent events in Venezuela, but keep telling us, all of you, about the Chavez legacy in this discussion. But I think it is important to look at where we are now, 6 weeks, I think, since we've had two rival leaders in Venezuela. Juan Guaido returned to Venezuela in the last few hours, Temir. Maduro said or threatened that he might arrest him, and he decided not to. Why, do you think?
It is not exactly accurate what you have said.
He said he'd broken the law. He said that very publicly. He could have arrested him or tried to if he wanted to, one assumes.
Sorry, can you allow me to speak?
Of course.
I'm not defending Maduro's position on this, but what needs to be understood is that since January 23rd, there is a challenge of power. There is an attempt to split. I mean, this long 6-year, or to be more accurate, 5-year crisis in Venezuela that has led to a very deep economic and social crisis is building on top of a very deep political crisis that goes back in the years of this polarization between Chavismo and between anti-Chavismo, or the opposition, historic opposition to the Chavista project. I have already said that in the last years, Maduro's management has made it easier, has made a case for those who have challenged Chavez in the past to criticize the government and, have the intention to replace him, to replace Chavismo in office. But during the last month, one of the factions of the opposition, one of the most extremist factions of the opposition, has led the country into this mess, which is, a challenging executive power that has been recognized by the US and some Latin American countries and some other European countries, that is trying to generate a regime crisis and is trying to force a regime change in the country. So the problem with that assumption is that it was expected by them that after January 23rd, the date Mr. Guaido self-proclaimed interim president, that there would be an institutional crisis in the country, that there would be defections in the military, that the state, if you will, would split, and that didn't happen. This is the deadlock we are embedded in now. So Mr. Guaido, for instance, has been improvising and trying to generate again that momentum for the crisis to happen. So he has fled out of the country, he has toured Latin America, he has come back to the country, and the media have been following this strategy as if it was extremely important for, Mr. Guaido go out, go in. The reality, if you will, that is my true belief, that the government, which is very irrational in its management of the economy, is at least aware of the fact that it would be a great mistake. It would be a huge mistake to go on Mr. Guaido, to imprison him, etc., because that would further deepen the crisis. Everybody here is aware of the threats that the US administration has made, that if anybody would touch Guaido, there would be retaliation, and the US government has threatened Venezuela with military action, saying all the options are on the table. Even Mr. Guaido has said that explicitly from Colombia. So it's a very delicate situation. And again, Mr. Guaido leaving or coming back is just a strategy to try to generate momentum for that breaking point to happen, which again has a lot against it inside the country. The reality of the country is much more complex. The military here in Venezuela is an institution, again, is an institution that will likely not split around this power struggle, and happily so. Again,
okay, can I let me stop you there for a moment, Temir? If I can get Roderick's view on that. The military is not going to join Mr. Guaido. It's interesting, I cover a lot of the time the situation from the UN in New York, and one very senior ambassador said to me, this could be sorted in 2 or 3 weeks, but if it's not done in 2 or 3 weeks, then probably we have stalemate. Roderick, we have stalemate, don't we? The military is not going to change sides.
Okay, well, first, about what Mr. Temir says, there is not such thing as Guaido is self-proclaimed. That's not true. He is the legitimate president of Venezuela because that's what Constitution says. And so it's like the thing that there is not true. That's not true that Chavez died on March 5th, and we can talk about this later. Chavez died in December 2012. And he's the Guaido, President Guaido is not the most radical.
Let you know, I was in the hospital when late President Chavez passed away.
I'm talking. Sorry.
Okay, so Temir, we'll bring you in again in a minute, Temir. But Roderick, can you just answer this question about the military? There must have been a hope in the Guaido camp. There must have been a hope in the Guaido camp, Roderick, that the military would change sides. They have not changed sides, Roderick. Roderick.
Yeah,
I was with late President Chavez when he passed away.
You have to take
I understand the point you're making, Temir. I just want to press Roderick, who is a supporter of Mr. Guaido.
It's a very delicate thing.
I understand.
I'm sorry.
I just want to press Roderick, though, who is a supporter of Mr. Guaido. Mr. Guaido said he wanted the military to change sides. They have not changed sides. That has not happened, Roderick. That must be. Okay. You must be disappointed by that.
What happened with the military forces right now? Mr. President Guaido is asking to the military to join him.
They're not doing so.
Recognizing him as president, legitimate Venezuela, and obeying him as a chief of command, as that he is, because Maduro is an usurpator. Okay, and this is the posture of the legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, right now. That's why I think he's not the most radical faction of the opposition, as this sir says. I think the most strong position in the public opinion is that it's necessary to change this game with the use of force. It's necessary because we are not talking here about that in the power. It's a bad government with Nicolas Maduro. He doesn't know how to make decisions. No, we are talking about there is a criminal organization in power controlled by Hezbollah and Hamas. Temir knows about it.
Okay, let me bring in Tom Long. Tom, we have a military that doesn't seem to look like it has any cracks in it or changing sides. Where does this go now? We have stalemate.
One Shia and one Sunni organization.
Sorry, Tom. This is a question for Tom
Sorry,
Long.
someone else is still talking and I
Tom,
can't answer.
Yeah, Tom, I'm interested in the military have not changed sides. We have total stalemate, it seems. Where does this go now? Because the poor Venezuelan people are already suffering. Life is getting worse. When you look at the figures, quite amazingly, 3.4 million people, according to the UN, have fled. That's well over the population size of the capital city.
Yeah, there's no questioning, I think, the depth of the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Venezuela now, and certainly of the refugee crisis that has generated. As you mentioned, what we've seen is stalemate. I think the opposition strategy, as well as the strategy of the countries, the United States, the Lima Group, and others who have backed Guaido, was that there would be rather quick movement. Guaido has said as much publicly. And that hasn't happened in large part because there was a miscalculation about the role of the military. And I think it's important, actually, when we talk about the military in Venezuela, that we actually recognize that this is not a monolithic bloc. And indeed, when we talk about armed actors within Venezuela, we're not talking about a single group. So there is a professional military made up of career officers that has, to some extent, been brought into the Chavista project over 20 years through promotions and some purges that were meant to increase loyalty. But this is a professional military. There are also groups, informal armed groups known as colectivos, that are much more ideologically beholden to the government and that have appeared as repressive forces around opposition protests. And then you have special forces that, again, have shown a much higher degree of loyalty to the Maduro government.
Okay,
so
I'd like to bring in Temir and Roderick again as we come towards the end of our discussion. You are on different sides and have been clearly for some time in Venezuelan politics. Do either of you see a room for compromise, a room where two men like you from different places could come to some sort of negotiated settlement, maybe a government of national unity? Very quickly, each of you. Temir first.
Yes, I will tell you that I have been a long-time advocate for dialogue, and I must state it here again, that there is no way out of this crisis out of a negotiation. I mean, there's no way out of this crisis that doesn't go through a negotiation. Here in Venezuela, where I am, in Caracas, I have met with leaders of the opposition. I have met with leaders of Chavismo. There is lots of reasonable people here that understand that at this point, the country needs to move on and we need to we need to build a Venezuelan solution.
Okay, I want to ask Roderick the same question. Roderick, can you see room, Roderick, for compromise with someone like Temir? Even if you don't agree with Maduro, do you think there are people in the old Chavez camp that you can do a deal with to create some sort of national unity government?
Yeah, okay. I cannot agree with some people, but I know one thing. Criminal must go in jail, so the dark group of the Bolivarian Revolution cannot be invited to join a democratic movement. This group must be neutralized somehow right now, because those people is killing Venezuelans, and they protect money laundering, narco-traffic, Islamic terrorism, and the darkest project is called for the Sao Paulo in the region. So this project is not only disturbing and destroying my country, it's also destroying other societies in the region. So in a new Venezuela, we are going to be very strong. Every person who made crime in the Chavista revolution must go into the jail.
Okay, Roderick, I have to stop you there, and I have to thank all of our guests. We have tried to look at all of this issue and the historical context and try to look for some compromise. So to our guests, Temir Porras, Tom Long and Roderick Navarro, thank you. Stay tuned to Al Jazeera. We have correspondents inside Venezuela and across the region for extensive coverage of this story. If you have views on the crisis, or if you want to watch this programme again, then go to our website, aljazeera.com, or one of our Al Jazeera apps. What should we discuss next time on the show? Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. On Twitter, our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, James Bays, and all the team here in Doha. Bye-bye for now.